Welcome back to the Finding Something Real podcast, friend. How do you go from a place of continually seeking love, identity, and acceptance from the things of the world to a place of finding grace and fulfillment in relationship with Jesus Christ? We're going to have a real talk about some of that today. I'm your host, Janell Wood. My friend Lizzy is back here today, my co-host, and you are listening in for season 7, where we talk with young women from various backgrounds about their faith journeys and allow them space to ask some tough questions about God and Christianity. And for the past couple of months, up until July, where we took a little break, Lizzy has been asking great questions about faith, and she's curated much of the content of this podcast for May, June, and August. And so I highly recommend that you go back and you listen to some of those previous episodes if you haven't already, where she shared some of her stories and her questions. And here's a short clip from our first conversation together. So someone who is looking for restoration or hope, you marked that too. Tell me about that.
The world sucks sometimes, a lot of the time. And so I don't know. I think like without God, that would suck way more. And so I just feel like, I don't know, the hope of that. Like, I don't know. That I'm not alone. I don't know.
Lizzy, you're back and you're doing some ironing. How are you doing today?
Good. Yeah.
Good. And as we're recording this, I know it probably won't air until late August or early September, but you and I I came back from summer break and it's been summer, July, and we're now into August. So,
that's crazy. I think today's August 1st, right?
As we're recording, yes. So how has your summer been so far?
Pretty good. Pretty good. Yeah.
Yeah. Any highlights? You got to see your exchange sister from Sweden?
Oh, yes. That was fun.
Yeah.
I got
Olga. Shout out to Olga.
Yes. Shout out to Olga. Yeah, I got to like swing dancing on Fridays. So that's fun.
Ooh. Is that up by the wave park? There's a wave park in our town where they do swing dancing for young people.
No,
right?
It's in a different location this year.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh.
It's out like slightly towards Manson.
Okay. So do old people like me get to go too?
I'm not sure.
No.
Maybe.
Okay.
There's not really many. though.
I want to go. All right, Lizzy, I have a quick question. Okay. I have a quick question for you though.
Sure.
I've heard from a couple people who've asked about these podcast interviews with you, and they love you. They love your questions. But one of the things that I've been asked about is the fact that you move around a lot when we're recording and you're not sitting right next to me. And I know we might have addressed it in the Patreon episode that went out in June, but I'm wondering if you wouldn't mind sharing a little bit about why you move a lot while we're talking.
It just helps me stay focused. Like, I have like ADHD and it just like gives my hands something to do so my brain can focus.
Yeah. Well, I love that you come as you are, and that I'm sure you are not the only person who needs to move around in order to focus. And so I love that on this podcast, we get to talk to different young women who are very different and come from different backgrounds. And you get to represent for people who, like you, need to move around in order to focus. And so I appreciate you sharing that, Lizzy. Thank you. Thanks for letting me ask you that question. Appreciate it. Yeah. I'm excited about today, Lizzy, because this was an episode that we were originally going to record quite a few weeks ago. Because of different tech issues and timing issues, we weren't able to do that. But it's been worth waiting for. I'm excited. Our special guest today is Robin Gerblick. Robin is here to share some of her personal story. She says she was born out of broken, delivered by destiny, and grown into God's grace. She's a teacher, award-winning author, communicator, lover of life, and the living water. She is also the founder and visionary of Exodus Women's Retreat, which focuses on faith, fitness, and freedom She and her husband of 30 years split their time between the Arizona desert and the mountains of Idaho. She is a mom to an amazing daughter and Grammy to two precious grandkids. And I'm so grateful she's here today. Welcome to the Finding Something Real podcast, Robin Gerblick.
Thank you so much. I'm so glad to finally be here.
I'm just glad that we've been able to make this work.
Yeah, me too. Although my hand might get a little tired here holding the microphone, but I'll make it work.
Yeah. Well, if that's the least of our problems, I think we're okay. Because I think last time, didn't we have an airplane issue and it was internet and all sorts of different things?
We had everything that God could throw at us short of like lightning storms, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. We'll take it. We'll take the handheld.
God is good.
Yep. Yeah. Well, Robin, you recently released a book called Giving Up Grace, the subtitle, A Spiritual Rebranding of the Soul. Will you talk with us about why you wrote it, what it's about?
Yeah. Well, I wrote it because God gave it to me. I'm old. We won't really talk about how old I am, but I had this big 40-year wandering in the desert, not knowing really what to do with myself or my story. And I thought there must be some reason or purpose behind it, but it just wasn't, it wasn't coming clear to me what to do with it until one night I had this big come to Jesus moment. And literally the voice of God said, you need to write your story. And not only that, I'll give you the name, I'll give you chapter titles. And it was really the voice of God that inspired me to do it. And it took 8 long years to write it. So,
wow.
It was a journey of enormous proportion.
Yeah. Was it an audible voice? I know there's some people listening who are so curious about that because they want to hear the voice of God. They want to know, is this the Lord speaking to me? How did you know it was Jesus who was talking with you?
Well, because he said something else. And at the time, I had not read the Bible. So I didn't know scripture or what the Bible said. I was actually a fairly new Christian. And I also heard him say, be still and know that I am God. And I was like, okay, like be still and listen to me. And it wasn't until much later that I found out that that was a scripture in the Bible, right? Psalm 46:10, I think. And so that was confirmation to me that what I was hearing was actually coming from God, because I didn't know that scripture from Adam. I just didn't know it. And when I finally found out that that was a scripture in the Bible, I was like, okay, that's it. I'll go ahead and write it.
Wow. Was it a voice in your head? Was it an impression? How did you hear it?
It was a voice in my head, which I agree sometimes might be hard to discern, if that's God or if it's just our thoughts or our desires that we want. But this was backed with scripture. So that's what I think made it real for me. There wasn't a doubt in my mind.
Wow. Well, I think that might be helpful for somebody listening. So thank you for clarifying a little bit about that, because I know that's one thing, there's so many voices in this world, so many things vying for our attention, and knowing, the voice of truth and the voice of our Heavenly Father is so important. And I know that He speaks to us in different ways, but He doesn't contradict His words. So I'm just grateful that you shared that. Would you mind telling us about your faith journey? I know you said 40 years of wandering. We'd love to hear some more of that.
Yeah, well, that 40 years of wandering is why I wrote a book, because I thought I need to not necessarily document it, but I just thought the journey was like the Israelites. just crawling through the desert, begging God for food and water and sustenance, to keep them alive. And really that's what I was doing too. I was begging the God that I didn't know, because I didn't know him, for help. And I needed help. I was doing things all the wrong way, looking for love in all the wrong places, looking at men to fulfill what only God could fill, but I didn't know that either. So it was a journey, and little by little, God just kept giving me affirmation after affirmation. But I did have a big lightning bolt experience. I don't know if everybody gets that or not, but I did. And it was pretty powerful. And I can describe it to you if you'd like.
Yeah. We'd love to hear that.
But
yeah.
I was, I'd already been married at that time three times. And I was on my fourth serious relationship, looking pretty seriously with this guy. And just something didn't feel right. And I took a walk down on the river path that was below my house and sat on a rock and literally cried out to God. I mean, I was in a very desperate place, and he found me there. And it was, I wear contacts or glasses, and I didn't have either of those on when I went for that walk. And when the lightning bolt hit, it was like I could see, I literally could see like the bugs on the leaves of the trees that were surrounding me. And the colors were electric, and just everything was like crystal clear. And my life was laid before me, literally, that I could see. And then it was the presence of God there at the river that said, you need to end this relationship. He's not the one. And you need to be looking at me first. And until you look at me first and you see the clarity that I'm showing you right now, it's going to remain the same for you unless there's a heart change. And so literally, Janell, I'm telling you, I ran home. I ran up that hill and I called the guy and I said, I'm so sorry. I love you. You're a great guy. And it's not your kids. Don't worry. It's not your kids. It's me. And I need to find Jesus first. And so I just said, I got to break up with you. And that was that.
Wow. Was Jesus on your radar before that? How did you know it was Jesus that was talking to you in that moment?
Well, this is going to sound pretty weird and pretty bizarre, but there is the supernatural out there. So when I was looking, my grandmother had also just passed away like a few days before that. And so I was grieving her. And when I was looking into the water and just praying my heart out and crying my heart out, I know this will sound weird, but I literally saw the word Nana in the water. Like there was the finger of God writing Nana in the water. And then right after that was when the lightning bolt hit and everything was clear. I mean, everything. There was no other reason why I could see as clearly as I was seeing. There was no question.
And just to clarify, not like a physical lightning bolt, but like
a spiritual lightning bolt.
A spiritual lightning. Okay.
Yeah. Like he just had to do a number on me because I wasn't listening and I wasn't paying attention. And he got my attention big time.
Wow. How long ago was that?
Let's see. Well, I have to backtrack. So I've been married now to the same guy, thank God, for 31 years. So it was, at least, I don't know, years before that, 4 years, 5 years before that. So it was a long time ago. And then my husband and I, my now husband, we found Jesus together. We sought our faith together, which was also new for me. So that was a beautiful, and still is a beautiful journey.
So you've been walking with the Lord long enough. I know that you have women's retreats. I know that you're a women's speaker, to know that a lot of people don't have a lightning bolt experience like that. Do you think that God knew that that's what it was going to require to get a hold of you? Or looking back on that, like, what do you think? Because that's special, Robin. Like that kind of like, hey, wait a second.
Need to get your attention.
It was almost like an Apostle Paul kind of moment, like, hey, road to Damascus, you're going the wrong way. Yeah,
well,
go ahead.
I think, like when I'm speaking, sometimes people will ask me, like, who do you identify with in the Bible the most? And, certainly the woman at the well is like my whole story. But the Bible does say that God knows every hair on our head and every day that we're alive. And he knew us before we were born in our mother's womb. He knew what life would be like for me. And still does. So, I think my heart, like, I knew there was a God, but that God wasn't in my life. And I think he had to do something radical to get my attention. So I would just wake up, really.
I guess the follow-up question to that, which again is not in my notes.
Oh, darn.
I'm just going to go up. Well, I just think, man, for God to have gotten a hold of you like that, and I've read your book, super powerful, very vulnerable story of searching for love. And for him to grip you like that, have you since then, do you struggle knowing his love for you? Or do you go back to that moment and go, no, I know the God of the universe has a deep, deep love for me? I'm just curious about that.
I think that's a really good question. And I think it's one that a lot of people struggle with because we all go through dry seasons, desert seasons where maybe we're not hearing the voice of God, and we've been asking and begging, literally begging. Like, I begged God. I went beyond asking for help. I was begging for help. I was begging for a chance to change. And I think, even though I am confident of his love for me, I still go through seasons where, like, okay, what, can't you just give me another lightning bolt thing so I know for sure? But you know that, and he does, but not all the time. So I don't question it anymore. Like, I know that he's there. I know that he's listening. But boy, I'll tell you, sometimes I just want to, come on, wake up, tell me, just give me that audible voice and just tell me. But I'm confident of his love for me. That's for sure.
Yeah. That's the part where it's like, you're God, I'm not.
I know, right? More of you, less of me.
I know. You have to repeat it again and again. Yeah. This is a big question, but how did you go from trying to find fulfillment and all of these other things, an identity wrapped up in comparison, the reflection in the mirror, men's sexual desire for you? How did you stop finding your identity in all of that? Because not everyone has a story like yours. But I think that what you've been through and seeking fulfillment in all of those other places is very relatable and something that a lot of people have experienced as well.
Yeah, well, I would answer that as another God thing as well, because when I met my now husband, I prayed heavily, asking God to make me unattractive to any other man, any other idol, and any other thing that would come along that would take away from the precious relationship that I had with my husband. So I actually prayed for that, and God honored that. There's never been any wavering. My husband is the most amazing man on the planet, and I know that God saved him for me. Just like we were talking about, he knows everything about us already. And it was like he handpicked my husband for me and knew that it would just be this precious union of marriage that would last into eternity. So it's pretty cool. But I did pray for that I could be in a relationship where I could put God first, and then the man in my life, my husband. And we both decided to put God at the head of our household, which made a huge difference in relationships. And he was the first guy that I had not had sex with. Sorry, Lizzy.
She's old enough, I think.
I wasn't exactly quite sure how old Lizzy is. So.
Lizzy, how old are you?
I'm 19 or 19 and a half.
19.
Okay. All right. Well, I feel better now.
She's had that conversation. Yeah, you're okay.
Oh my gosh. But yes. So
suddenly traumatized.
I know. So sorry. Please forgive me.
I appreciate you sharing all of that. And I know you had experienced something different in your previous relationships and your previous marriages and stuff. So you said that having God as the anchor in your marriage has made a huge difference. What difference did it make?
Well, I think it keeps you grounded, and in my book, I talk about being grounded in God's grace. And I think, I've lived both ways, where I didn't know God's grace and his mercy that follows, and just being grounded in his grace changes everything. And it teaches you, I think, too, that, relationships are just their relationships, right? Ups and downs, goods and bads, all of that. And before, it was super easy, interestingly enough, for both my husband and I to walk away from relationships when things got a little dicey. And this time we had a commitment. We had made a commitment to Jesus in our marriage. And I mean, I can count arguments in 30 years on one hand. We really just don't have them because we've already been through all of that, and we know what we don't want in a relationship. But putting him first keeps us grounded and keeps our mind and eyes focused on him first. And I think, in my opinion, it's the best for any marriage or any relationship.
Mm-hmm. So. Yeah. It's good. So one of the things you talk a lot about in your book is comparison. And I want to get to that in a second, but you also talk about, the feelings of rejection, the feelings of constantly wanting that approval of men. And like I said, I think that's relatable for a lot of people, but for you personally, why do you think those were things that were so hard for you, or things that you struggled with so much? Because I think that other people will feel not alone by hearing some of that from you. What was it about your story that set you up for desiring those things?
Well, I think it started at a young age, just because I didn't look like anyone in my family. My brothers, they look alike. You could clearly see like my mom or dad in them, but I didn't look like anyone in my family. So from a young age, I had this feeling like I was adopted, like I came from somewhere else. And I didn't have a lot of confidence because of that. And I was really kind of geeky when I was young, really tall, really thin. Just when I'd look in my oval mirror, I didn't see who I see now. And I wanted so desperately to be like all the other girls and have, straight blonde hair and, beautiful eyes and all this stuff. But as a young, young woman, I just didn't see myself that way. And while my mom was an incredibly supportive, loving mom, my dad, he wasn't like dads of today, where I see dads now with their young daughters and I see them super involved with their daughters' lives. And my dad was a dad of the 50s. He was a great provider. He was always there. But there was not a lot of affection or building up from a male role model when I was young. And writing the book has helped me kind of dig into a lot of that to try to figure out where it came from, because I grew up in a super loving home, not a broken home, but I didn't get the love and probably the feedback that I was craving from my dad. Like my brothers got his attention, my mom had my attention, and it was just sort of like that. So I became like, well, how do I win love? How do I get love? How can I get that affection from my dad? How do I do that? And I kept coming up short and not being able to get it. And so I think that I sought that in men, just looking for that attention, affection, reassurance, maybe, that you are, I don't need to be beautiful, but at least you're attracted to me, or I'm attractive to you. So it's been a journey on that one for sure. And I think it's a journey that a lot of young girls struggle with. We look in the mirror and we see something that to us, to our eyes, isn't what God is seeing. God sees us as completely perfect and beautiful. But in our own eyes, until we learn that love that he has for us, I don't know, you just start looking in all the wrong places for it.
You, like I said, talked about comparison in your book. And on page 77, you said, I certainly couldn't imagine God could love me more than Dave or any boy for that matter. How in the world could my identity be tied to someone or something I couldn't see, feel, or touch, much less know? This echoes some of what Lizzy and I have talked about regarding identity. So how in the world is your identity now tied to someone you can't see or feel or touch? And how do you know that he's there even now?
Such a great question. And it's interesting that you're even bringing that up, because at our Exodus retreat, I'm actually doing a talk called Taste and See, which is the whole thing on how do we believe in something that we can't see, feel, touch. And I think it's because the world teaches us that seeing is believing, right? I mean, if we can see it, we can touch it, we can smell it, it's real, tangible, we got it. But when you're asked to believe in something that you can't see, feel, or touch, then you go, well, that's where believing is really seen. So I think until you get to a point of believing the word of God and knowing who God is and knowing his character and his love for us, which is immeasurable. I mean, it just goes beyond our wildest dreams. It's something supernatural, but that's grace. The way I view it now is God is love and love is God. They're synonymous with each other. And once you grasp that, your identity no longer has to be what you feel you're seeing in the mirror. It's when you stand in front of that mirror, you see what God sees in you. And that's that's a beautiful thing. And it's also a beautiful place to be. But it has to be, I'll use it again, but grounded in his grace in order to be able to see that in yourself. If that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Knowing who he is before we can really know who we are.
I just, without knowing him, I mean, I could see how my life was without him. And then I see how my life is now with him. And, people look at me now and they're like, oh, she's got it all together, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, you have no idea how long it took to get here, and all the stuff just to get here. But
do you feel like you really do have it all together?
I mean, as much as my earthly self can. I mean, obviously we're not Jesus, right? So we're not perfect. But I think, all connected, spirit, soul, and body and mind. How God created us is incredible. And as much as I can be like Jesus, I try, but I'm human, right? So, but I mean, for the most part, I feel pretty together now. I'm hoping at like 70 that I've got it together somewhat by now.
Yeah. Yeah. You talked about in your book about a friend named Grace Stevens saying to you, it's important to know who you are and whose you are. You say in your book, after a long string of broken sexual relationships, you had no idea who you were or whose you were. How do you answer that question now?
Well, I think when you go from relationship to relationship, you literally leave a piece of yourself inside of whoever that is. You leave a piece of your heart, you leave a piece of your soul, you leave all the most important and beautiful parts of yourself, giving to somebody that doesn't deserve all those beautiful parts of you. So now I just look at it as, I have that. How do I explain that? I have that all in my heart now, where it's there, and I'm guarded on who I give it to now. Obviously, my husband gets all of me, but for sharing like my mind and my heart, my emotions, my thoughts, all of that, I'm a lot more guarded with that now. I don't always let everybody in, because that can cause hurt sometimes. And there's a certain vulnerability to love. And I remember when, I'm probably getting off track here, but when I met my husband, both of us had come from bad and broken relationships. Him not as many as me, but when we were dating, I sent him some flowers to his office, and I just one of those little cards, that comes attached, that you can attach on the flowers. And it just said, to love is to be vulnerable. And he still has that card in his wallet today. He's kept it all these years. But I think, there's a certain vulnerability that we have to give back, to God and to those in our circle, when we have that trust and feel safe.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Did that answer your question? I'm not even sure. I get
off
on these tangents.
How do you respond to who you are and whose you are?
Oh, was that the question? No.
Yeah. But I mean, I liked what you said, so it's all good.
Oh my gosh. Well, yeah. I think in a roundabout way, it probably answered it. But, I belong, I'm a Jesus girl. So, I belong to him first. And that's, that's the bottom line. Then I belong to my husband. Yeah.
You can trust him with your vulnerability. Right. Yeah. Lizzy, you've been
really
quiet. I know I haven't really, I haven't made room. So do you have any questions for Robin or follow-up thoughts on anything that she shared?
Oh, not really. I'm just enjoying listening.
Yeah. Do you feel like you can relate to anything that she shared so far?
Kinda, yeah. Like, not the same experiences, but like, maybe like where you were at, it sounds like. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
Searching for approval from other people, maybe?
Maybe. I don't know.
Yeah. It's really hard, even when you're a Christian, to, to not fall back into that rut, that pattern of, oh, I want this person to approve of me or to say that I'm good, to put that stamp of approval on me, and to really go, okay, that comes from the Lord. I know I've struggled with that in my Christian walk. I know Lizzy and I have shared a little bit about that in our conversations. So, Robin, any tips in that area? Because I'm sure there's somebody listening who has struggled in that as well.
Yeah, I would love to know a little bit more about Lizzy's story, though. But I know that I listened to her other interview with you, and just how can I best answer that? Can you give me that question again?
Yeah, Lizzy, do you want to reframe it so it's more closer to your questions about identity, or do you want me to try reiterating what I just said?
I guess more of my questions with identity is like, wait, what did you say? And then I'll
I did like the stamp of approval thing, like how we're always searching for a stamp of approval from other people to say, like, you're good.
I feel like, what about, when you're, or something happens that challenges who you feel like you are at, like, I guess the core of your being? Like, how do you, I don't know, what do you use to have, like, the confidence to actually know that's not my identity, like, my identity doesn't come from that, like, it comes from this, or, like, what do you use to help, find I don't know. I don't know how, I'm not wording this right, but.
I think I understand what you're saying. And I think I was going to say a lot of it comes with age and experience. But then as soon as I said that, I realized that I know young women who are very confident in who they are and whose they are. So I don't know that it's necessarily tied to age and experience. That was just in my case. But now, and there are times, Lizzy, when I go back, that I can fall back into that trap of maybe not feeling as good and strong about myself as I should, or positive about myself. But when I do, I go back to the Word of God. I ask and I pray. Sometimes I beg for just the answer, for God to give me fresh eyes to see something, a new heart to feel something, and really just a new perspective on life. And I heard something the other day that really kind of hit me. And I was having a conflict kind of with a girlfriend, and she said, "You know what? I choose to see the best in you." That was all she said. And I thought, well, it got me thinking, right? And so now if somebody approaches me with something where it could be questioning identity or questioning faith or questioning anything like that, but it may be offensive, and I may find myself judgmental towards that person. And then I just think about what she said. And I just said, I choose to see the best in you. I choose to see what God sees in you. And when she spoke that over me, it gave me, I guess, the confidence that I needed to go back to the mirror and go, you're still okay. You're okay. You got this. But when we don't choose to see the best in other people, and we get judgmental. The words that we speak over people are so powerful that maybe we don't realize that sometimes. And so now my mission is to always seek and always see the best in someone and speak life over them, and not speak death or something that makes them think negative about themselves. I don't know. Does that help, Lizzy?
Yeah, I guess.
Do you have anything that you want to follow up on or ask Robin?
Not particularly.
That's all right. I got some more questions here. It's
Can
good.
I ask one of Lizzy?
Yeah, go
Lizzy,
ahead.
do you ever feel like judgmental about people?
I think I'm always judging people, but not like a good or bad, like just like making observations. So I'm judging, but I don't think I'm necessarily judgmental.
I like that, because you're not meaning in a mean way, right? You're meaning it
Yeah,
in a positive way, that you're not judging the person or being judgmental, but you're maybe questioning or observing.
yeah, observing is a good one.
Okay.
Robin, why did you ask that
Oh,
question?
I was just curious. You know, at 19, I was super judgmental. So just because I didn't know any better, and I didn't know Jesus either. And, you know, I think I was a very judgmental person, and it's something that I continue to work on. So that's why I choose to see the best in you, right? That I'm not going to look at anything else.
Yeah. Going back to that vulnerability thing that you were talking about earlier, I heard a speaker one time talk about, you know, how she chooses to let people in, you know, to have access to different things in her life. And she kind of talked about a
A
bullseye.
what?
And a bullseye,
Okay.
you know, like
Yeah.
like if you're playing darts or something. Yeah. And kind of going back to that judgmental thing that you guys were just talking about, like you make observations, like who am I going to allow into the center of the bullseye? Who am I going to let into the outer parts of that bullseye? And who am I going to let, you know, in that very outer part? And she was talking about how in the very center, you know, that vulnerability with God, but then how the people that are around that are people that are very close, that she's gone through a lot of life with, that are on the same path as her, that are headed the same direction, you know, that are people who can speak to her life, both in a positive way and in a way that, you know, it's iron sharpening iron. It's sometimes hard to hear, but she knows that those people come from a place of wanting what's best for her because they are anchored in the same thing, which is the Lord. And then on that outer circle, you know, are people that you care about, that you have relationship with, but maybe aren't headed in the same direction or who don't have access to those deeper things, you know. And then on the further side, and I found that so helpful because I think sometimes, you know, in an effort to wanting to be nice and everything, we forget that we do have to have discernment. And maybe judgment is the best word, but you know, we have to observe and understand that we don't have to be vulnerable with everybody or let everybody into that secret place or whatever, but it's going, okay, Lord, who have you brought into my life that I can be completely raw and vulnerable with? You are number one, right? And then are there other people that you've brought into my life that we can have that kind of relationship with? And so often we want people like that in relationship. And sometimes the people that we want to give access to really they're headed in a different direction, or they're not people that we truly can trust with that. So I found that super helpful, and I don't know if it really relates to what you guys were talking about, but I thought it did. So I'm just throwing it out there. Maybe it's helpful to somebody.
No, I think it is, and I think a lot of times, I don't know why this is even coming to me. It's totally not related, but on my 70th birthday, I went hatchet throwing. And when you said bullseye, it reminded me. but it reminded me about how hard it really is to get the target in the center.
Mm.
And when I think about that, the center is the sweet spot. It's the spot that you want, and your inner circle, and then what keeps people from getting into the inner circle. And I know we weren't talking about this, but one of the things that makes me think, and what I've found over the years, is that women in particular have a lot of jealousies. And jealousy keeps us from getting and being allowed in that inner circle. Like I can't remember what that saying is, but it's something like, be you, because everybody else is taken. And but there's a lot of people that want to be you. They don't want to be me. They don't want to be themselves. They want to be somebody else. And I've just, maybe Lizzy, I've just observed that in people. And it's hard to let those people in your inner circle, because you're wondering, like, what's their motive? What are they? Are they truly, are they truly your friend? Are they truly going to have your back? And I just figure, like, at this advanced age, like, I'm just starting to figure that stuff out. And I thought, Lizzy, you've got it all together. I mean, at 19, I wish I would have had it all together at 19 like that. but I mean, there are a lot of things that keep people from entering that inner circle, or that keep them on the periphery of that circle. And it just made me think of that hatchet throwing, how hard it really is to hit that target, and how hard it really is to find those people, those core people that can be in the center and at the center of your life, and that have your back.
How did you like make the decision to let God in your inner circle? Is it kind of just you felt like you ran out of things that weren't working, or?
Yeah, that's a super good question, Lizzy. And yeah, I was trying to do everything myself, instead of, because I didn't know that God could help me with stuff. So, I tried to do everything myself, and in my own humanness, I'm not capable of that. And you reach a desperate place, you just are in desperation. And I don't know, I just cried out to God. I mean, I literally said, I can't do it anymore. I'm making a mess out of things. Please, help me, begging for help. And yeah, I think you get to a point of desperation where everything that you're doing in your own human power, it just doesn't work. We struggle and struggle and struggle when we ask why. Well, there's the reason why, is because we don't know God, we don't know his love for us. And without that, it's just, well, we keep going around in circles, and we never do hit that sweet spot. At least I didn't, until I found him. That was a great question, Lizzy. Thank you.
I always wonder about the people who don't crash and burn, finding fulfillment in themselves or different things, And I think, as messy as some of our stories are, how grateful I am for the mess because it led me to Jesus, I mean, I grew up in a Christian home, but I had my own times of wandering and wondering and questioning things. And I'm so grateful that none of the other things that I sought fulfillment in really could do it, that I was able to recognize that, as painful as that was. It feels like a mercy of God that I didn't get what I wanted,
Well, I think
yeah.
another thing that I heard recently is that without the test, there is no testimony, right? So I think, we're all here for a reason and a purpose. That we're here, Lizzy, you too, for this particular time and space on this planet. So there's a reason why we're all here. We're not just placeholders, and God has a plan and purpose for each one of us. And it's just a matter of having the eyes to see and the ears to hear him. and the trust, the vulnerability,
Mm.
all of that.
Yeah. Because like you said, he already knows the hairs on your head. He knows it already, right?
Yeah.
He knows. Speaking of vulnerability, there's a lot of raw vulnerability in your book, Robin. And I think that's not always present in contemporary Christian nonfiction. It almost reads like a diary. What made you decide to be so real and honest and not gloss over painful details in your book? Because it is rare in that way.
Yeah, well, now I say to people, well, my life is literally an open book, right? Because it is. And to me, there was no other way to write it, because I think about Jesus and the things that he faced. He was a rebel and a revolutionary. He was turning over tables in the temple, and he hung out with prostitutes and sinners. And, he got his hands dirty when he created us. God did, so we were already dirt anyway. We were dirty. We were vulnerable. We were raw, all of those things. And I didn't think that there was any other way to write it. And it did pose some problems in the beginning because there were a lot of Christian publishing houses that did not want to publish my book because of that, and had asked me to change a lot to make it more Christianese. And I broke contracts over that. Because I believed so strongly in writing the story as authentically as possible. Some of the wording and language in there I know is very or can be offensive and abrasive. But I didn't know Jesus then, so there wasn't really a way to gloss over that. It was just me being my authentic self. And then, towards the end of the book, obviously there's redemption and hope and freedom and forgiveness and all of those great things. But in the beginning, that wasn't my life. And to write it any other way, I'm really just not even capable of doing that. So.
Well, I think that you'll probably reach different people than you would if you had kept it, Christianese, maybe.
Well, I really hope, and and I believe that it's, a God-given goal for me too, is that I know that there's people out there. I'm not the only one that's had a story of failed relationships and looking for love in all the wrong places and, going through, can I speak to abortion or whatever? I mean, but I know that I'm not the only person. So whether somebody knows Jesus or doesn't, I'm hoping that they pick that book up and they find hope and that they find Jesus through my story.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Is that what you hope comes from your book? Like, if you could see anything happen with it, the impact that it has, would it be that people see there's hope and that there's Jesus? That he loves them?
Absolutely. And if it saves one young woman from aborting her baby, then yes, that's the whole goal of it. I just found out a couple weeks ago, actually, that there's a couple of unplanned pregnancy organizations that are using the book as a resource book for their clients. And I mean, that's to me just the best thing is that, somebody contemplating that, they read that story and they read the pain and the trauma that you go through, but yet there's hope on the other end of all that.
Yeah. And we didn't even talk about that part of your book. If people want to read your book, it's available on Amazon and all sorts of different places. But Giving Up Grace is the title. And you had a couple of abortions when you were lost. And now, if I'm correct, you now share with, like you said, women who have had similar struggles or in ministry, you're sharing, and your story is encouraging. I know you've spent a lot of the last few decades sharing with women about your story and being open and vulnerable with them and seeing, I imagine a lot of women come to, hey, there's grace and there's love and there's forgiveness with Jesus. Is that true, Robin?
Yeah, it's more true than I ever really imagined. When I speak, the women that come up afterwards, um, I can think of one woman who had just lost her husband, and she had never told her husband that she had had an abortion. She never told anyone.
Mm.
And now he's gone, and the shame that she was carrying. And all I did was put my arms around her and listen, as she cried and finally released after however many years that was. But knowing that her husband would not ever know that was like this horrible, shameful secret that she had kept all those years. So, things that I never would have expected in my wildest dreams. But there's something super beautiful, without getting emotional about it, is to just put your arms around someone and just love on them and just listen to them. Just listen to their story. Sometimes that's all people really need, is just somebody to listen.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
an unexpected thing from the book, for sure, and for sharing the story.
Yeah. There's this quote that I love by a guy named David Augsburger, and he says, being heard is so close to being loved that to the average person, it's basically indistinguishable.
Wow.
And I just think it's so powerful when you think, sometimes we think we have to have all the answers when in reality, just listening to somebody in their pain, share can be super powerful. Would you share a little bit about your ministry before we ask you the final question, Robin?
Are you talking about the Exodus?
You can share about whatever ministry you'd like to right now.
Well, I guess, that's my platform or whatever it is. But yeah, and it kind of stems from the same thing. It was like how to bring women to Jesus in an unconventional way. And to be out in the wilderness and experience God, like the Israelites experienced God, and Moses, and he took 3-day journeys all the time to the mountaintop, to be face to face with God. And so it really was born out of a desire to help women also find Jesus, but find him out in nature, in the wilderness. So I've been doing it. This is my 19th year of putting on women's faith-based wellness retreats. And it's just been so fulfilling. Like the women that come on the retreats, we are so blessed by the women that we meet on those retreats. And they find Jesus. And if they already know Jesus, they find fresh eyes, fresh heart, all of that to be able to experience him in a different way, maybe that they never thought before. So it's just a beautiful thing. I keep asking my team, I have a couple people on my team that are there from the start, like 19 years. And we keep looking at each other like, all right, when are we going to retire? When are we going to stop doing this? And I don't know. God hasn't made that clear yet. So we're going to keep going.
Wow. So if people want to hear more about that, where would they find that information?
We have a website, exoduswomensretreat.com. And we're also on social media, on Facebook and Instagram. And we post daily inspirations and put out information about upcoming retreats. So we're everywhere.
Wonderful. All right. Final question. Finding something real. It's about a journey towards restoration, eternity, authenticity, and love. REAL is an acronym for those things: restoration, eternity, authenticity, and love. Which of those things stands out to you the most in your life right now, and why?
Well, you might even probably guess it, but authenticity. Just because it's I'm having to be so real and open and myself right now. So it's important to me to have people see Jesus through me, and for me to be able to be as authentic about my journey as I can, speaking the truth in love. But I would definitely say authenticity right now. And probably if you asked anybody to use a word to describe me, they would probably use that word as well. You know, I'm one of those people that pretty much says her mind, and but speaking the truth in love, though. So it's not to offend anyone, but yeah.
Lizzy, you got any final thoughts for Robin?
Oh, I not really. I just think it's funny that you were saying that about authenticity, because I'm described the same way.
Oh, I knew I liked that.
Yeah. Kindred spirits.
Kindred spirit, for sure. I want to know what you're making over there, or what you're sewing, or what are you doing?
It's a friendship bracelet.
Oh, a friendship bracelet.
Oh, that's
look at
beautiful.
That. That's really good. Nice.
Oh, maybe someday you'll make me one.
Maybe we can come on one of her retreats.
Oh,
that'd be fun. Well, Robin Gerblick, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for this time. Thank you for your authenticity and your vulnerability. And thank you for pointing us to Jesus. Until next time.
Thanks for having me.